The first sign was how quiet the house had become after my birthday dinner ended. Not quiet like peace, quiet like distance. My children had all come, even those who never did. They brought store-bought cake, plastic smiles, and the kind of questions that don't sound like questions at all. "So, Dad, have you thought more about the will?" That was my eldest, Rachel, trying to sound casual as she topped off my coffee. She stirred it with a spoon like she owned the mug. I watched her fingers, her nails always too perfect, like she didn't do a damn thing with her hands anymore except point and sign. I just nodded and looked down at my plate. The roast beef was cold by then, same as the room had gone after I said I hadn't made any changes. No one spoke for a moment. Even my grandson Connor, who usually only talks about his phone, glanced up. The air turned stiff, and that's when I realized they weren't here for me. Not really. When they left that night, I washed the dishes alone, one by one. Took my time. I looked out the kitchen window and watched the last of their cars pull away, brake lights vanishing down the hill like they couldn't wait to be gone. My bones ached in the places they always did. Left hip, lower back, the fingers that built everything they now quietly expected to inherit. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from pain, not from age, but from the words they didn't say. Hanging in the air like cobwebs I was too tired to sweep away. 2 days later, I caught the second sign. My youngest, Ethan, dropped by just to say hi, holding a clipboard and a grin too wide for the hour. I was in my slippers, feeding birds in the backyard. He stood there like he didn't know whether to sit or sell me something. "Dad, listen," he began. "Have you ever thought about downsizing?" "Downsizing?" I asked. "You know, this place, it's big, too big for one person. We could help you find somewhere easier to manage, more sensible." I didn't answer right away. The blue jays were squawking, fighting over crusts. I watched them longer than necessary. "You mean a home?" I finally said. Ethan's face twitched, just a little. "Not necessarily, just somewhere better suited." I nodded, then turned back to the feeder. "You'll get this house over my dead body," I muttered. He laughed awkwardly, as if it was a joke. It wasn't. Not for either of us. When he left, I didn't go back inside for a while. I sat in the old iron chair that Miriam and I used to fight over in the summer. She said the sun hit it perfectly. Now it just hit the cracks in the paint. I sat and I thought about how I'd built this place, every board, every nail. I remembered working 3 jobs, the busted knuckles. The night Miriam brought me lemonade and said, "Don't let this house kill you." Back then, it was for the family. Now the family wanted to gut it before I was cold. I started noticing more signs. Phone calls that came only after paydays. Visits timed suspiciously close to bank holidays. My middle daughter, Janine, started sending me articles, links to retirement communities in Florida, testimonials about estate planning. Her texts always ended with a heart emoji, like that made it softer. She hadn't asked about my arthritis in 3 months. I think the worst moment came the day they fought in my own living room. I hadn't even left the house. Rachel and Ethan came by on the same day, unplanned, or so they claimed. It started with small talk and ended with them snapping at each other over who was going to manage things when the time came. They said it like I wasn't even there. I was sitting in the recliner. I cleared my throat. Nobody looked over. I got up, walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and came back, still arguing. Not about me, about the house, about the money. That night I sat by the window, stared at the moon. Miriam used to say it looked bigger when you were older. I think it's just that everything else feels smaller and sadder, like children who forget what hands raised them. The next morning I called my lawyer. "I want to change my will," I said. "Okay," she replied, calm as ever. "To what?" "To nothing," I said. "To no one. They get nothing." There was a pause, a long one. Then she said, "You're sure?" "I'm tired of being measured in square footage and savings accounts," I told her. "It's my money. I'm still alive. I want to enjoy what's left." "Then do," she said. "It's yours." So I did. I booked a trip, just a small one, to start. Venice. Miriam always wanted to go. I took her photo in my coat pocket. I booked a first-class ticket, stayed in a room with a balcony, and ate pasta with wine every night. I watched sunsets and fed pigeons and took pictures I'll never show anyone. Not because they wouldn't care, but because they don't deserve to see what joy looks like on my face anymore. When I got home, I started spending more. I sold the guest house, bought myself a vintage car just for the hell of it. I took cooking classes, I danced with strangers, I laughed again. It scared the hell out of my kids. They started texting more. "Dad, is everything okay? Why are you selling things? We're worried about you." I didn't answer. Then came the knock at the door. All three of them, standing there like they hadn't rehearsed their entrance. I let them in, watched their eyes scan the house for what was left. "Dad, we need to talk," Rachel began. I just smiled. "I know," I said, "but this time, you're going to listen." The photo albums were still in the hall closet, under a broken umbrella and behind a stack of VHS tapes nobody could play anymore. I hadn't opened them in years. Not since Miriam died. Dust settled on the leather spine like snow, soft and undisturbed. But after they left that morning, after the "we need to talk" turned into "you're not thinking clearly," I found myself sitting on the floor with the album across my knees. It cracked when I opened it, dry from age, like everything else in this house. The first page was our wedding, summer of '69. Miriam wore a yellow dress, not white. She said white never suited her, too traditional, too soft. She wanted sunflowers in her bouquet and Chuck Berry on the stereo. We couldn't afford a big church wedding, so we used my cousin's backyard. Folding chairs, plastic tablecloths. It was hot, and half the guests got sunburned, but God, we were happy. She looked at me that day like she knew exactly what kind of life we'd have. Not easy, but real. I turned the page, and there was Rachel, red-faced and howling, minutes after being born. I remember that moment like it was last week. I was there, holding Miriam's hand while she screamed. The nurse handed me this tiny bundle, and my hands trembled so bad they nearly took her right back. But then Rachel stopped crying the second she heard Miriam's voice. Even back then, she needed control. Then came Janine, softer than Rachel, more serious. Her baby pictures always looked like she was already suspicious of the world. She didn't like being touched much, not even by me, but she'd fall asleep on Miriam's chest every time. Sometimes I'd just sit there and watch them breathe together. That was enough. Ethan came last, our surprise baby. I was already 44 when he was born. My back ached, and I had bags under my eyes and more bills than I could count. But Ethan was different, always smiling. He didn't cry much, just looked around like everything was brand new, and it was. We were older, more tired, but also more forgiving by then. Ethan gave me that. The next few pages were cluttered with birthdays, Christmas mornings, lost teeth, graduations. I remembered the year we couldn't afford presents and made our own board game out of a cereal box. The kids loved it, said it was better than Monopoly. Now they give their own kids tablets and gift cards. I don't even think they remember that winter, but I do. Miriam always kept us together. She was the glue. She'd kiss the kids' foreheads every night, even after they got too old for it. "I love you enough for when I'm gone," she used to whisper. She knew something I didn't, maybe. She was always healthier than me, stronger in spirit. But cancer doesn't care about spirit. It came fast, brutal, left me with hospital forms and syringes and a bed that wasn't ours. The last picture of her was in the garden, 3 months before she died. She was thin, tired, but she smiled anyway, holding a tomato in one hand and waving at me with the other. I remember thinking, she still looks like home. After she passed, the kids came in waves, each handled it their own way. Rachel took control, planned the funeral, called the relatives, divided the fridge food like she was running an inventory. Janine cried once, quietly, in the laundry room when she thought I wasn't looking. Ethan didn't talk at all for 2 days, just sat in the hallway with his knees up to his chest. Then they all left, and I stayed. The silence was thick after that, thicker than grief, because it didn't go away, it just changed shapes. It showed up in the sound of the kettle, the thump of the mail slot, the groan of floorboards with no footsteps. I started talking out loud just to pretend someone was here. I'd sit in Miriam's garden chair and say, "Well, the beans are dying again," or "Damn, raccoons got in the compost." Sometimes I swore she answered, other times I swore she didn't. It took a year before I started sleeping again. Not well, just enough. By then, the kids had resumed their lives. Jobs, divorces, debt, weddings, visits became rare. Rachel once brought her twins for 20 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. They sat on their phones the whole time. Janine sent postcards. Ethan called on his birthday and never on mine. I didn't mind. Or I told myself I didn't. What else can a man do when everything he built starts to drift away from him? Still, I kept going. Cooked my own meals, paid the bills, trimmed the hedges when my back allowed. I learned how to use the damn internet. Bought myself a used laptop. Started reading history articles and watching documentaries, little things to make the hours softer. And sometimes I still felt proud. I gave them a life better than mine. None of them went hungry. None of them knew what it was like to shovel coal in the snow before school. They had beds, music lessons, braces, vacations, college. But that's the funny thing about sacrifice. Nobody remembers what it cost you. They just count what they think they're owed. So when they asked about the will, when they started planning around my death like it was a scheduled holiday, something in me snapped. Not anger, not even sadness. Just a click, like a door unlocking after years of waiting. They remembered the comfort, not the work, the food, not the hunger, the gifts, not the overtime. They remembered the house, but not the hands that built it. I closed the album slowly, ran my fingers over the cover. I thought about burning it, but I didn't. Not because I was sentimental, because I wanted to remember what it cost me. Because if they ever asked why, I wanted to be able to say, I gave you everything once, I won't do it twice. And with that, I stood up, dusted off my knees, and opened the front door. The sun had just started to rise, and for the first time in years I wasn't waiting on anyone to show up. The roast was overcooked. I knew it before I even took it out of the oven. Miriam would have clicked her tongue and told me I should have set a second timer, but she wasn't here. And anyway, the food didn't matter. I had spent the whole day cleaning the house, rearranging chairs, putting out those faded cloth napkins we only used for special occasions. This dinner wasn't special, not to me, but it seemed important to them. It was Ethan's idea. He called the week before and said, "Let's do a family dinner, Dad. It's been too long." I should have been suspicious then. Too long for what? Too long since we sat around the same table? Or too long since they could get a good look at what was left? Rachel arrived first, 15 minutes early, holding a tray of store-bought tiramisu and a bottle of wine she didn't let me open. She wore too much perfume, hugged me like someone greeting an old co-worker. "Daddy," she said with a rehearsed smile. "You look good. Thinner, maybe." "Arthritis burns the weight off," I replied. She laughed, a little too loud, and went straight to the kitchen. Next came Janine and her husband, Kurt. Kurt never said much to me unless it involved stocks or maintenance fees. He looked around the house like he was checking for cracks. Janine kissed my cheek and commented on the garden, said it looked manageable considering. I nodded. Considering was doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Ethan was last, late as always. He burst in, hair still wet from the shower, smiling like he hadn't been gone for 5 months. "Hey, old man," he said, slapping me on the back. "Missed me?" "Hadn't noticed you were gone," I said. We sat around the table, 6 of us, the kids, their partners, and me. Miriam's chair stayed empty. I thought about moving it, but I didn't. It belonged at the head of the table. They said grace like strangers, saying thank you to a waiter. Then the real meal began, not the food, the conversation. "So, Dad," Rachel started, carefully buttering a roll, "have you thought about downsizing?" Kurt jumped in before I could answer. "You know, property values are great right now. This area is booming." I took a bite of roast and chewed slowly. "You two seem to have given this a lot of thought." "Just looking out for you," Rachel said sweetly. "We worry." Janine cleared her throat. "We all do. I mean, this house, it's a lot." Ethan poured himself a drink. "You're not exactly getting younger, Pops." "No," I said, "but I'm not dead either." The silence that followed was the kind you could lean against. Heavy, uncomfortable. Kurt cleared his throat and tried to pivot. "Have you updated the will?" "Still got the same name on it," I said. "Mine." Ethan chuckled. "No, seriously, have you decided what's going where? The lake house, the investment accounts, there's a lot to consider." "I have considered it," I said. "And what I've considered is that maybe I made a mistake." "What do you mean?" Janine asked, voice tight. I set down my fork, looked at all of them. "I think I made a mistake raising children who see me as a spreadsheet." Rachel scoffed. "Dad, that's not fair." "You're right," I said. "Fair would have been you coming over to help clean the gutters last month instead of sending a link to a handyman." Ethan leaned back. We're just being practical. You always taught us to think ahead. Thinking ahead is buying insurance, I said, not standing around someone's table measuring the drapes before the body's cold. Kurt raised his hands. Whoa, let's calm down. You calm down, Kurt, I snapped. This isn't your family. You don't get a vote. He shut up after that. Janine looked like she might cry or yell. Hard to tell with her. Rachel shifted in her seat. Look, if this is about money. It's not about money, I said. It's about respect, about love, about remembering that I'm still breathing. You treat me like a dead man with a wallet. Ethan stood up. This was supposed to be a nice dinner. Then why does it feel like a negotiation? I asked. No one answered. I stood slowly. My knees popped like they always did. I picked up my plate, walked to the kitchen, and dumped the roast in the trash. The sound of it sliding off the plate was louder than I expected. I'm done eating, I said. You can help yourselves to whatever's left, and then you can leave. Janine rose. Dad. No, I said firmly. Not tonight. Not anymore. They trickled out, quiet now. Kurt with his hand on Janine's back, ushering her like a security guard. Rachel kissed my cheek without touching me. Ethan just gave a lazy wave and said, You'll change your mind. I didn't answer. Just stood in the doorway and watched the taillights glow, one by one down the gravel driveway, same way they always left. When they were gone, I poured myself a drink. Sat in Miriam's chair, it still smelled faintly of her, lavender and old wool. I let the silence come back. This time it felt earned. And as I sipped bourbon from a cracked glass, I realized something. That dinner didn't end anything. It started something. Because for the first time, I wasn't just their father. I was my own man again. I hadn't opened the will in 6 years. Last time was just after Miriam died. I remember sitting at the lawyer's office, still wearing the black suit from her funeral, hands too shaky to hold the pen. Back then, everything was a blur. Grief has a way of dulling your thoughts and sharpening your regrets. She and I had drawn up the will together. Simple, fair, equal shares to the children. The house to Rachel because she lived the closest. The lake cabin split between Ethan and Janine, and a few thousand left to the grandkids for college. I remember Miriam saying, They'll understand. They'll appreciate what we've left. And I believed her. We both did. But now, years later, I sat at the kitchen table in my bathrobe. The will unfolded before me, and all I could think was, they don't understand anything anymore. The paper was stiff, the kind of parchment that makes you feel like you're sealing your fate in ink. There were my children's names, printed neatly, spaced evenly, like they all mattered the same, like they'd all be grateful. But that's not what I saw last week. What I saw was 3 people already licking their lips before I was even cold. Not a word about who'd water the garden. Not a word about the old photos or Miriam's books. Just numbers, assets, equity. I took a pen and circled the line that said equal distribution. It felt like a lie now. Equal to what? Their love? Their visits? The way they had turned into vultures in nice shoes? No. Something had to change. I called Karen McKinley, my lawyer. She was good, smart. Didn't flinch when I told her what I wanted. I want to rewrite everything, I said, pacing around the living room while the cordless phone clicked softly. All right, she replied calmly. What's changed? Me, I said. Them. Karen didn't ask more than she needed to. That's what I liked about her. She scheduled me for the following Thursday, told me to bring my ID and whatever new instructions I had in mind. I spent the next few days thinking about it. Not just the money, the memory. Because that's what a will really is. It's the last thing people remember you for. And I didn't want mine to be a list of payouts. I wanted it to be a message, a final, clear note written in something stronger than words. So I made a list. I left the house to no one. I'd sell it myself, use the money while I was still alive. Go see Rome, buy better whiskey, maybe get that knee surgery I'd been putting off since 2009. The lake cabin? Going to a charity for veterans. Miriam's brother died overseas, and she always wanted to do something in his name. This would be it. The rest, investments, cash, whatever was left, I split 3 ways, but not between my children. I named 3 people instead. Helen, my neighbor, who brought me soup during flu season and refused to leave it at the door. Larry, the retired mechanic down the road who fixed my lawnmower twice and never took a dime. Daisy, the waitress at the diner who remembered Miriam's favorite order even after she passed. None of them were family, but they treated me like a person, not a prize. When I arrived at Karen's office, she raised an eyebrow at the new names but didn't say anything until the end. "You sure this is what you want?" "I'm sure," I said. "They might contest it." "They can try," I said, "but if they do, it'll prove my point better than anything written here." Karen smiled faintly. "You want to leave a statement." "I want to leave the truth," I corrected. After everything was signed, notarized and sealed, I walked out feeling 10 pounds lighter. The sky looked clearer. The air didn't press so hard against my chest. For the first time in years, I felt in control again. Not just of my money, but of the story I was leaving behind. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of scotch and Miriam's old sweater draped over my shoulders. I watched the bay, listened to the waves brushing against the shore. I thought about how many times we'd sat here together, planning a future we thought would last forever. Funny how money outlives people. My phone buzzed just after sunset, a message from Rachel. "Hey Dad, just checking in. How are things?" I didn't answer. I watched the light fade behind the trees and let the silence speak for me. They'd learn soon enough, and when they did, they'd have to sit with the truth, that love isn't owed, it's earned. And I wasn't a prize to be divided. I was a man. And finally I was free. The morning after I signed the new will, I woke up with a strange feeling. Not fear, not regret. Something sharper, clearer. It was the first time in a long while I opened my eyes and didn't feel like the day was just a waiting room for the inevitable. The light was soft through the curtains. The sheets were still warm, and my first thought wasn't about the pills in the drawer or the old ache in my hip. It was, what now? For years I had done everything responsibly. Saved every extra dollar, fixed the roof myself, never took vacations unless Miriam begged. Even after she died, I lived like she was still watching, careful, measured, frugal. I wore shirts until they frayed at the collar. I clipped coupons. I drove the same car I'd had since Ethan graduated high school. All because I believed the story we're told, that growing old means shrinking down, tightening up, saving for a day that may never come. But that morning, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself like a stranger. White hair, crooked spine, skin like creased paper, and still breathing. Still here. They wanted me to wind down. I wanted to finally start. So I made a decision. A radical one. I was going to spend every last dime, not recklessly, not out of spite, with purpose, with joy. I was going to enjoy the life I'd waited too long to live, not in secret, not quietly, openly, proudly, extravagantly if the mood struck. I started small. I bought new shoes, good ones, not on sale, leather that smelled like memory and polish. I ordered a custom cane, something sturdy with a silver wolf's head for the handle. I walked into a steakhouse alone and ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, paired with wine I couldn't pronounce. The waiter asked if I was celebrating anything. Yes, I said. Me. Then I started booking trips. Venice first, then Prague. I'd always wanted to see the astronomical clock there, watch it move like it had since the 1400s. I walked cobbled streets with a tourist map and nobody to tell me I was walking too slow. I sat by the river and fed ducks and didn't check my phone once. I took photos, not to show anyone, just to prove to myself I had been there. I bought myself a watch, not because I needed to tell time, but because I wanted to remember that time was still mine. Back home, I renovated the kitchen, hired professionals, no more fixing broken tile with glue and a prayer. I had the wallpaper replaced, chose bold colors, deep green, like the forest Miriam loved. I even had the master bath redone. Heated floors, rainfall showerhead, because why not? Who was I saving it for? The neighborhood noticed. Helen from next door stopped me on my way back from a morning walk. "You're glowing," she said, squinting behind her glasses. "You seeing someone?" I laughed. "Yes," I said. "Myself. Finally." Ethan noticed too. He dropped by unannounced one afternoon, probably thinking something was wrong. He saw the new couch, the art on the walls, the wine rack. "You redecorating?" he asked. "Living," I said. He didn't like that answer. I could see it on his face. "You know, Dad, it's smart to keep some reserves," he said, sitting on my new velvet chair like it offended him. "Long-term care isn't cheap," I nodded. "Neither is wasting your best years worrying about dying broke." He didn't stay long after that, and I didn't mind. I kept going. I took a painting class, bought a telescope, donated anonymously to a scholarship fund at the college Miriam once dreamed of attending. I tipped waiters like I was royalty. Bought a piano and hired a teacher to come every Wednesday morning, even though my fingers shook and my tempo was trash. But the joy, pure. People started talking. Rachel called after hearing from a mutual friend that I'd bought a motorcycle. "You're having a midlife crisis at 77?" she said, half laughing. "I'm just late," I replied, "but not too late." Janine emailed link to an article about financial fraud targeting the elderly. Said she was just looking out for me. I didn't reply. They were nervous. Not because they cared about me, but because they saw the numbers slipping through their fingers. They thought my life was their investment. And now the stock was crashing. Good. I booked a cruise to Antarctica. A dream Miriam and I shelved after she got sick. Cold air, white silence, a ship full of strangers and a horizon that felt like God had erased the end of the world. I stood on the deck with frost on my beard and thought, she would have loved this. And in some way, I think she did. Maybe part of her was watching after all, nudging me to order dessert and flirt with the bartender and laugh so hard it hurt. When I got back, there were 3 voicemails waiting for me. "Rachel, Dad, call me. We need to talk. Have you been making large withdrawals? We saw some alerts on the joint account." "Okay, seriously, what's going on? Are you sick?" No, I wasn't sick. For the first time in a long time, I was healing. Every dollar I spent wasn't just a withdrawal from my account. It was a deposit back into my soul, my story. The version of myself I'd locked away after Miriam's death, the one they'd all forgotten, was still here. And the truth is, I didn't need their approval or their permission. I just needed time, and I was spending it wisely. Soon, the rest would run out. The money, the days, the breath. And when it did, they'd be left with confusion. Maybe anger. But hopefully, just hopefully, a hint of understanding. Because I wasn't dying bitter. I was living bold, and every cent I spent was worth it. The first thing I did was buy a globe. Not one of those dusty library kinds. This one spun on a brass axis and lit up from within. I put it right in the living room, where Miriam's old bookshelf used to be. Every morning I'd walk past it, give it a spin, and wherever my finger landed, I'd say, maybe next. The thing about being free isn't the noise, it's the space. Space to move, space to breathe, space to dream without asking anyone's permission. After 77 years of being careful, cautious, calculating, I had finally stepped off the leash. No more dinner invitations filled with hidden agendas. No more waiting by the phone for children who only remembered me when the market dipped or tax season rolled around. I was no longer waiting for life to slow down. I was speeding up. I started with Vienna. I'd always wanted to see the opera there. Not because I understood it. Hell, most of it's in languages I don't speak. But because Miriam used to hum arias while doing the laundry. It felt sacred, somehow. A small homage. I bought the best seat in the house, wore a new blazer, sipped champagne with people half my age and twice my ego. And when the soprano reached her final note, I closed my eyes and let the sound cut through me like light through stained glass. I cried. Right there in the theater, tears running down my cheeks in the dark. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did, but I didn't care. It wasn't sadness, it was release. When I came back, the house didn't feel like a coffin anymore. I replaced the curtains, painted the walls, threw out every mug that had a crack or a slogan. I bought a new mattress, not because I needed one, but because I'd always wanted to sleep like kings in hotels did. Now I do. Every night, soft as cloud, no guilt. My next trip was Japan. I stood beneath cherry blossoms in Kyoto and remembered the way Miriam once said, "If you blink, you'll miss beauty." She was right. The petals drifted down like a silent snowfall, pink and perfect. I wandered temples with my shoes in my hands, bowed to strangers, ate sushi that cost more than some of my old paychecks, and I smiled. Not politely, truly. I started taking pictures. At first, just landscapes, safe, quiet. But then I began asking strangers if I could photograph them too. Old couples holding hands, street performers, children chasing pigeons. I printed them, framed them, filled my hallway back home with faces I didn't know but somehow felt connected to. Those photos didn't belong to any legacy, they belonged to me. And the more I traveled, the more alive I felt. Barcelona, Istanbul, New Zealand. One night in Morocco, I danced in a plaza with a group of college students who didn't know my name. They taught me the steps. They called me Old Lion. And I laughed so hard I forgot how much pain my knees were in. Back in Henlop and Acres, people noticed. The cashier at the co-op started calling me World Traveller. Helen next door invited me to her book club, not because I liked books, but because, as she put it, you seem like a man with stories now. She was right. I had become the kind of man I used to envy from across the room, the ones who didn't care if their socks matched or if their opinions ruffled feathers. I took up painting, badly, but I didn't care. I bought big canvases and messy brushes and let my fingers fly. I made colours that never existed in my house before, blues like silence, reds like rage, yellows like memory. I started cooking differently too, no more canned soup and dry toast. I roasted lamb with rosemary, made pasta from scratch, learned how to caramelize onions just right. I ate dinner outside, even in the cold, wrapped in a thick blanket, listening to jazz on a Bluetooth speaker. Sometimes I talked to Miriam, sometimes I just listened, and every so often my phone would buzz. A message from Rachel, a missed call from Ethan. Janine's voice in a voicemail, pretending concern but weighted with questions. We heard you sold the cabin. Someone said you withdrew a large sum. Are you okay? Are you sure everything's all right, Dad? I never responded, because silence now was power. I had spoken with my money, with my actions, with my joy. They had all the answers. They just didn't like the ones they got. I did receive one letter, though, from Connor, Rachel's oldest, 19. It was handwritten, short, shaky penmanship. Grandpa, Mom says you're doing weird stuff, but I think it's cool. If you ever want to show me your pictures, I'd love to see them. I pinned that letter to the fridge, first thing I'd put on it in years. My days settled into something new. Not routine, rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons painting or writing in a notebook, evenings making cocktails and watching the sun bleed into the bay. Sometimes Helen joined me. Sometimes I danced alone. I even bought a dog, a scruffy little thing from the shelter. Named him Vivaldi because he barked like a string quartet warming up. We go everywhere together. People smile when they see us walking down the road. Some ask what I'm celebrating. Life, I say. Just life. And as each dollar dropped from my savings, I felt lighter, freer, richer. Because what's wealth if it only waits for your eulogy? These years, these freedom years, are mine. Not borrowed, not held in trust for people who stopped seeing me as a person. They're wild and loud and tender, sometimes painful, sometimes lonely, but never empty. I may not have much left in the bank, but I've never felt less bankrupt. It started with Rachel's voice on the answering machine. I'd just come in from the garden, Vivaldi tracking muddy paw prints across the hallway, when I heard it. Dad, I've been trying to reach you. Someone told me you were in South Africa. Are you okay? Please call me. The message ended with that sharp little sigh she always made when she was pretending to be calm. It used to bother me. Now it made me smile. I didn't call her back. 3 days later, Janine sent an email. Subject line, urgent, we need to talk. She attached an article about elder abuse and financial scams. Wrote a paragraph asking whether someone had gotten into my accounts, asked if everything was still in my name, then closed with, love you lots, always here. The kind of sign-off that feels more like a transaction than a sentiment. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what was disappearing. I was spending too much, not on them. And that was the problem. They tried subtlety at first. Rachel sent me a digital calendar invite for a family Zoom. I declined. Ethan texted a photo of an old fishing trip with a caption that said, miss these days. I replied, me too. The quiet was lovely. Then they dropped the act. Rachel called, this time Liv. I answered because I was feeling generous. She didn't even say hello. Dad, we need to talk. Are you okay? I mean, really okay? I just got back from Lapland, I said. Saw the northern lights. They looked like someone spilled God's paint box across the sky. A pause. Then you're not answering my question. No, I said, I am. I'm more than okay. I'm alive. You're spending, she said, her voice tight. You're blowing through everything. I didn't say anything for a second. I just looked out the window where Vivaldi was chasing a squirrel like it owed him money. That's what it's for, I finally said. She exhaled sharply. Dad, we talked about this. You talked, I said. I listened. That's different. She tried guilt next. Mom would have wanted you to be careful. Mom also wanted to dye her hair blue and get a tattoo, I said. She just didn't get the chance. Click. Silence. They started visiting again then, not all at once. That would have been too honest. Ethan showed up one Saturday morning with a six-pack and a forced grin, said he happened to be in the neighborhood, which was a lie. He lived 4 hours away. He walked through the house like a buyer, paused at the new hardwood floors, raised his eyebrows at the art on the wall, stared at the bottle of Japanese whiskey I'd splurged on. "Looks like you've made some changes," he said, cracking open a beer at 11 a.m. "You know what they say," I said. "Can't take it with you." He gave me a strange look, like he was trying to figure out whether I was joking or having a breakdown. We sat on the porch. I poured myself a finger of scotch, watched Vivaldi chew on the leg of a plastic flamingo I'd planted in the yard as a joke. "Dad," Ethan said slowly, "look, we're just trying to understand. You've been different." "I am different," I said. "I decided to stop pretending I was already dead." "But you always told us to plan, to think ahead. What about medical costs? What if something happens?" "Then something happens," I said. "And if I die with 2 cents in my pocket and a smile on my face, then I'll consider it a life well spent." He looked down at his hands. "You're not leaving us anything, are you?" I took a sip of scotch. Didn't say a word. That was answer enough. He left that afternoon, hugged me tighter than usual. I could tell he was scared, not of losing me, but of losing what he thought he was owed. A week later, Janine came by. She brought homemade cookies, oatmeal raisin, Miriam's favorite. Hadn't baked them in 15 years. She wore a fake smile and perfume too sweet. "Just thought we could talk," she said, handing me the tin. We sat in the sunroom. She sipped tea. I fed Vivaldi bits of biscuit under the table. "Dad," she said softly, "I know we haven't always been close, but we care about you, and we're concerned." "You think I'm losing my mind?" "Well, maybe. I don't know. You're making choices that don't make sense." "To you," I said. "They don't make sense to you, but they make sense to me. I spent my life waiting, saving, sacrificing for what? So you can divide it up while I rot?" "That's not fair," she said, eyes stinging. "Isn't it?" I asked. "You never cared about the garden, or the old record player, or the clock Miriam bought from that shop in Quebec. Not once did you ask how I was feeling, just what I was doing with the money." She didn't argue, just stared into her tea. After she left, I opened the tin. The cookies were dry. Rachel's turn came next. She didn't bring cookies. She brought a folder, sat at the kitchen table like a banker. Spreadsheets, numbers, projections. I let her talk. "We're just trying to make sure things are sustainable," she said. "It's not about us. It's about you, your safety, your future." "I've lived my whole life for the future," I said. "Now I'm living for now." She pushed the folder toward me. "Just look, think about it, please." I closed it without glancing inside. "You remember when you were 10 and you wanted a pony?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "You begged. Every day. Said you'd feed it, clean up after it, ride it every morning. You cried when I said no." "Yes," she said warily. "You didn't want the pony," I said. "You wanted the idea of the pony, but you didn't know how to take care of it." She stared at me. "You don't want me," I said quietly. "You want what I leave behind, but you're not ready for the work that comes with it." She stood up, fast. Didn't say goodbye. After that, the messages slowed, the calls stopped. For the first time in months, I had the house to myself again. And it felt good. I wasn't lonely. I was free. And the only thing better than freedom was watching the people who took you for granted finally realize they'd lost you long before you were gone. It was a Sunday afternoon when the storm finally came. Warm, humid, air so still the birds weren't even singing. I was in the garden, trimming dead heads off the roses, when I saw Rachel's SUV pull into the drive. The sharp, urgent way the tires kicked gravel told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a visit. Ethan's car followed close behind, then Janine's. 3 cars, 3 children. Not a birthday, not a holiday. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on my jeans and waited. The doors opened almost in unison, like they'd practiced it. Rachel was wearing her sharp-heeled lawyer shoes, the ones she always used to wear when she meant business. Ethan had on a ball cap pulled low and a tense jaw. Janine clutched a manila folder, her lips pressed so tightly together they looked like a scar. They didn't even say hello. "We need to talk," Rachel said, her voice clipped and cold. "So talk," I said, gesturing to the porch. "But do it on the swing. I'm too old to be scolded standing up." They followed me up the stairs, sat like vultures, legs crossed, hands tight. Rachel opened first. Of course she did. "Dad, we know you changed the will." I looked at her. "Is that so?" "Yes," Janine said, setting the folder down on the table between us. "We've seen the updates. You left the house to no one. You donated the cabin, and you left the remaining funds to strangers." "Strangers, Dad. Not strangers," I said calmly. "People who showed up when you didn't." Ethan leaned forward. "So that's it, then? You're cutting us off because we didn't come mow the lawn enough?" I didn't answer right away. I rocked slowly in my chair, letting the silence spread out like ripples on water. "This isn't just about a lawn," I said. "It's about the way I disappeared in your lives and no one noticed. It's about the way you argued over my bones before I even stopped breathing." Rachel's face flushed. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I said. "You sat at my table and asked about the will like I was a ticking clock, like I was your retirement plan. You weren't checking in, you were checking balance." "We're your children," Janine said. "We deserve something." I turned to her, eyes sharp. "You deserve what you've earned. And what you earned was distance, years of silence, calls only made when something broke or someone needed a signature. When was the last time you came just to sit and talk to me?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Ethan scoffed. "This is revenge, then, for getting older, for us having lives." "No," I said. "This is clarity. This is the sound of a man waking up after years of waiting for his children to see him, not as a bank, not as a burden, but as a person. And when that didn't happen, I chose to stop waiting." Rachel stood abruptly. "So that's it? You're just going to blow everything on cruises and parties and strangers? What about us? What about your family?" I looked up at her, held her gaze. "You stopped being my family when you stopped acting like it." The words hung there, heavy, final, like a nail in a coffin. Ethan stood next, paced a little. "You're not thinking straight," he said. "This isn't you." "No," I said. "This is me. The me you haven't bothered to know for years. The me that stopped begging for affection dressed up as obligation." Janine picked up the folder again, opened it, rifled through papers. "We could contest this," she said. "It's erratic. The court might see it that way." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Go ahead," I said. "Drag me through court while I'm still alive. Tell the judge I spent my money on myself. See how well that plays." "We're just trying to protect you," Rachel said, her voice cracking now. "No," I said, leaning forward. "You're trying to protect your inheritance, not me. Me, you've left behind years ago." For a moment, no one spoke, just the creaking of the swing, the hum of distant bees. My hands, still stained faintly with soil, rested on my lap. I looked at each of them, one by one. "You know," I said quietly, "Miriam and I used to talk about this, what we'd leave behind. She always said, if they don't remember the dinners, the stories, the hugs, then what good is the money?" I swallowed hard. "You don't remember the dinners. You don't remember the stories." Janine's eyes were glassy now. Rachel looked away. Ethan stared at the floor. "But I do," I said, "and I remember doing it all without thanks, without help, and still loving you, fiercely, completely. I stood, but now I'm loving me, and that's not something I'll apologize for." Ethan stood too. "You're going to die alone, you know." "I already did," I said, "for years. They left soon after." Janine didn't look back. Ethan slammed his car door hard enough to rattle the windows. Rachel lingered a moment, stood by her SUV like she wanted to say something. But she didn't. Just got in and drove off. I sat back down on the porch. The sun had shifted now, casting golden lines across the yard. Vivaldi came trotting up from behind the rose bushes, tongue lolling, tail wagging like the world had never known conflict. I scratched behind his ears, took a deep breath. The confrontation had happened. And I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't begged, explained, or softened the truth. I'd said what needed saying. For the first time in my long, careful life, I had chosen me. And no one, not blood, not guilt, not memory, was going to take that away. It wasn't long after the confrontation that the letters started. Not from the children. No, they'd gone quiet again. Too proud or too angry to say more. But the letters came from my lawyer, Karen, confirming the last of the paperwork. Assets sold, accounts closed, donations made. I kept only what I needed to live comfortably, not extravagantly. Enough for jazz on vinyl and good scotch, enough for winter trips to warmer places, enough to breathe. The rest, gone, or given. I set aside one last task, something I'd been avoiding, not because it was hard, but because it was final. Writing the letters, the ones they'd receive after I was gone. I bought 3 envelopes, plain white, no flourishes. I sat down at the old writing desk Miriam used to use for Christmas cards and baby thank yous. Dust still lived in the corners. Her handwriting was still inside the drawer, a grocery list scribbled on a yellow post-it note. Eggs, lemons, dish soap, love. I smiled, then began. You were born stubborn, just like me. You always wanted to be the one who knew, who led, who had the plan. I admired that in you once. I still do in a way. But somewhere along the line, your planning turned into possession of others, of me. You treated my life like a business and yourself like its heir. But life isn't a ledger, and love doesn't grow from obligation. You asked what you were getting, what I left behind. This is it, the knowledge that control and care are not the same. If you want to be remembered well, love without counting. To Janine, you always felt things more deeply than the others, but you buried it under order and routine. You didn't cry when your mother died, not in front of me anyway, but I heard you in the laundry room, the night of the funeral. I never told you that. I think part of you knew what was coming, how distance grows when we don't water it. You brought cookies once. Dry as dust, but I ate them anyway. You asked what you'd been given. This is it. The understanding that love has to be louder than silence. Call your son tonight, tell him you're proud. Don't wait for him to ask. To Ethan, you were always the charming one, the baby, the golden boy. But charm has a shadow, an ease with forgetting things, especially people. You called me old man the last time you came by. Maybe it was a joke, maybe not. I was never angry with you, just sad. You wanted me to stay safe. What you really meant was still. Still enough not to disrupt the fantasy that you'd done your part by showing up late with beer and excuses. You asked what you'd inherit. This is it, a question. Who are you when no one's watching? Live in a way you'd be proud of, even if no one ever applauds. I sealed each letter with trembling hands. Not from emotion, but age. The body forgets how strong it used to be. The heart doesn't. I gave the letters to Karen with clear instructions. They'd be delivered after my death, not before. I didn't want a reply. I didn't want a second chance. I just wanted the truth to arrive when it was most impossible to ignore. With that done, the last of my affairs were settled. I had nothing more to give, and no more explaining to do, except perhaps to myself. One night, not long after, I sat out on the porch. The air was cool, not cold, just enough to make you grateful for a blanket. Vivaldi curled at my feet, snoring softly, a mug of tea in my hand. I watched the moon rise like it was showing up just for me, and for the first time in a long, long while, I felt full. Not of food, not of bitterness, just full, with peace, with memory. I remembered Miriam in her yellow dress, spinning barefoot on the lawn. I remembered baby Rachel wrapped like a burrito, screaming until she heard her mother's voice. I remembered Saturday pancakes, soccer games, band concerts, missed anniversaries, arguments about money, road trips. The time we ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere and sang old country songs until someone stopped to help. I remembered a whole life. No one ever told me getting old would feel like this. Not just ache in the bones, but ache in the space where people used to be. But even that hurt was beautiful in its way. It meant there had been something worth missing. The next morning, I made breakfast for myself. Oatmeal, as always. A little sugar, a pinch of cinnamon. I walked out to the mailbox barefoot, just to feel the dew on the grass. The world was soft, slow, the kind of morning you want to fold and put in your pocket. The papers were waiting, official, final. Account closures, property sales, receipts of donation, confirmation that my wealth, such as it was, had gone to hospice programs, community gardens, and one small scholarship fund under Miriam's name. The children would receive nothing but those letters, and maybe someday a memory of who I really was. Not a vault, not a title, just a man. And in the end, that was my gift, or lack thereof. After I died, the house stood quiet for a while. Helen from next door said the lights stayed off for 2 days before anyone came. Vivaldi had been taken to the shelter. Someone heard him barking inside after the mail piled up and called it in. He got adopted 2 weeks later by a teacher with a gentle voice and a garden full of marigolds. He didn't wait for anyone. Dogs understand how to move on. The news reached my children slowly, like a rainstorm creeping across dry land. Janine was the first to call Karen, my lawyer, not with tears, not with questions about my final hours. Her voice was steady, flat. What happens now? What happened was 3 sealed envelopes, 3 thick silences, and a will that read like a locked door. By the time they gathered again at my house, my former house, it had already been cleared out. Sold. The new owners, a young couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever, were scheduled to move in the following week. The swing on the porch still creaked in the wind. Someone had left the lilac bush alone, and it had bloomed brighter than it had in years. Rachel walked through the living room first. She ran her fingers along the mantel where the family photos had once been. The wall was bare. No framed smiles, no diplomas, no Miriam in her yellow dress. The house felt colder than she remembered. But maybe it was just the absence of ownership. Absence of certainty. Janine found the piano. She lifted the lid, touched a few keys. They echoed, unaccompanied. Her husband stood beside her, waiting to be told what to do. She gave him nothing. Ethan opened the fridge. Empty, like he expected a beer or a ghost. They didn't talk much that first day. They read the will, reread it, checked the names, rechecked the footnotes, called Karen again to ask if there was a mistake. No mistake, she said calmly. Your father's wishes were very clear. He left everything to strangers. No, Karen corrected. He left it to people who were present. The scholarship in Miriam's name got a write-up in the local paper. Helen framed it and sent it to Janine, who left it on her desk for weeks before putting it in a drawer, face down. Rachel tried to find out more about the donations, filed a records request, but most of it was anonymous. She hated that. Hated not knowing where things went, who had them, what they were worth. Ethan joked about it once at a family barbecue 2 months later. Guess the old man got the last laugh, huh? Nobody laughed. They didn't cry either, not together. Grief didn't come all at once. It came in splinters. In the grocery aisle when Janine saw my favorite tea on sale. In the static silence of Rachel's car radio as she passed Henlop and Acres and couldn't turn in. In Ethan's half-formed sentences when his friends asked, "What did your dad do in the end?" The letters came later. Weeks after the funeral, delivered by certified mail. Rachel read hers in the kitchen, standing up. She didn't sit, didn't breathe. Her hands trembled only once, and then she folded the letter and locked it in the drawer where she kept her mother's scarf. She never spoke of it, but she did visit her daughter at college that weekend. Brought soup, didn't mention the will once. Janine read hers on the back patio, wine in hand. She cried softly, not a flood, just enough for the wind to carry it. Later that night, she called her son, told him she was proud of him. He didn't ask why, maybe he already knew. Ethan's letter stayed unopened for 4 days. He left it on the counter, paced past it. Finally, after a beer too many, he tore it open and read it twice, the second time slower. He went outside, stared at the stars, and for once didn't take a picture of them for Instagram. He sat in the grass and stayed quiet for a long time. Months passed, and something strange happened. They started remembering. Not the money, not the will. Me. Ethan visited the shelter and donated money for dog food, asked about Vivaldi, found out he was happy. He sent a thank you card anonymously to the new owner. Janine took a painting class, didn't tell anyone at first, just showed up on Tuesday nights with a brush and silence. Rachel joined a community gardening group. She didn't talk about her past, but she started digging, planting, sweating. She brought home dirt under her fingernails and once, while rinsing them in the sink, said softly to no one, "You'd like this, Dad." They didn't come closer to each other, not exactly. Grief doesn't always unite, but it teaches and it humbles. And over time, they stopped calling it the inheritance. They started calling it his decision. One day, Janine stood in front of a class of high school seniors and taught a lesson about legacy. Not just the financial kind, but the real kind. The kind that lingers in recipes, in stories, in the way someone hugs a grandchild. Sometimes, she said, the greatest gift someone can give you is the truth, even if it hurts. And somewhere, beneath a cherry blossom tree in Japan, beneath a mosaic sky in Istanbul, Beside a quiet stretch of river in Vermont, there were pieces of me left behind. Photos in strangers' albums, laughter in hotel lobbies, warmth in memories no one could buy. My final gift wasn't money. It was a mirror. And eventually they looked into it and saw something real.